Untold Black Stories. I always believed that truth would eventually win. But that night, as they drove me in the back of a police car, cold, cuffed, I doubted it for the first time. Because truth didn't matter. Only someone's mistake did. And the color of my skin. Those words echoed in Malcolm Pierce's mind as the cruiser turned into the rear lot of the precinct. His wrists ached from the cuffs. His voice was hoarse from saying it over and over again, "I didn't do anything." But no one listened. Worse, no one asked. He was 35. No criminal record. A steady job at a home appliance warehouse. He never had trouble with the law. But that Friday night, everything changed. The robbery happened a few blocks away from where he stood at the bus stop. A witness mentioned a tall black man in a dark hoodie. At that same moment, Malcolm was heading home from his evening shift. Tired, hungry, and just wanting to make it to his apartment. But someone in a squad car decided he fit the description. Two white officers didn't ask for his name. One pulled a gun. The other shouted for him to get on the ground. Malcolm obeyed, though his heart pounded like a trapped drum. Minutes later, his hands were in cuffs, his face pressed to the dirt as an officer pinned him down with a knee. Still, no one explained why. At the station, he wasn't allowed a phone call right away. After an hour of silence, a detective finally appeared, cold and indifferent. He told Malcolm he'd matched the suspect in an armed robbery. The surveillance footage from the scene was grainy, distorted. Still, it was already entered as evidence. Malcolm asked if they could even see his face. The detective didn't answer. They kept him up all night. By morning, a public defender was offered, a tired-looking man who seemed more interested in closing the file than fighting for him. Malcolm stared at him and made a decision. One that came from frustration, fire, and from having nothing left but his dignity. He would defend himself. It was impulsive, maybe even reckless. But it was also necessary. "You're not a lawyer," the judge said dryly during the preliminary hearing. "I've seen this before. It doesn't end well. But if you insist, it's your right." Malcolm nodded. His gaze never wavered. He had already lost his freedom. He wouldn't surrender his voice, too. Later that day, sitting in the holding cell with the case file in front of him, Malcolm flipped through the documents. His eyes stopped on a single sentence. Just one line. But it was enough to make him sit up straighter. Something wasn't right. And he was going to prove it. Malcolm sat in the cramped attorney meeting room, only this time, without an attorney. In front of him was a stack of papers, reports, statements, procedural documents. He understood one thing clearly: none of these pages would speak for him unless he made them. Outside the glass wall, other defendants passed by with their lawyers. Some laughed. Some begged. Some looked defeated. Malcolm stayed silent. He had no legal degree, no courtroom experience. But he had something else: focus, and a burning refusal to disappear into the system. He kept rereading the arrest report. Several inconsistencies jumped out. In one section, the arrest was noted at 9:45 p.m. In another, 9:10. And the footage from Officer Brantley's body cam? It began at 9:38. That meant the camera didn't record the start of the stop, or worse, there never was a proper stop at all. Malcolm scribbled the timeline into his notes. The next day was the first real hearing. Once again, he refused the court-appointed lawyer. Judge Williams asked him for the third time if he was sure about his decision. And once again, he heard, "Yes, Your Honor." The courtroom was quiet, thick with tension. The prosecutor, Ms. Rosen, looked confident. She read the charges: armed robbery, resisting arrest, assaulting an officer. Malcolm clenched his jaw. Assault? He hadn't laid a hand on anyone. That would be the first lie he'd dismantle. He was granted a brief opening statement. Standing at the podium, holding a handwritten sheet of notes, Malcolm looked directly into the eyes of the jurors. "My name is Malcolm Pierce. And I am not a criminal. I'm the son of a nurse and a school bus driver. I don't have a weapon. What I do have is this voice. And I'm going to use it, to tell you the truth. Because this case has more questions than answers. And if you look closely at every detail, you'll see, I'm not here because of a crime. I'm here because of a mistake." The judge tilted his head slightly but gave nothing away. The prosecutor simply smiled. Witness questioning began. Officer Brantley confirmed he recognized Malcolm from a description. "Please describe that description," Malcolm asked calmly. "Black male, dark hoodie, about 6 feet tall." "How many men of that height and wearing dark clothes walked past the store that evening?" Malcolm pressed. Brantley shrugged. "I don't know. I responded based on the situation. It wasn't enough to collapse the case. But it was enough to spark the first flicker of doubt." After the session, Malcolm walked back to his cell with a strange sensation, not victory. But something had shifted. A tiny crack in the massive wall built around him. Small, almost invisible. But he felt it. The air in the cell was heavy. Somewhere in the corner, 2 men were arguing loudly. Malcolm sat still, his forehead resting against the cold wall. His mind kept circling back to the words he'd spoken at the podium. And then, to the face of his mother, a face he hadn't seen in months. He'd promised her he wouldn't give up. And now, giving up simply wasn't an option. That morning, Malcolm looked composed, almost distant. He had learned to keep his emotions buried deep. Every gesture, every breath, every glance could be twisted against him. So he gave them nothing. Today's hearing would feature the prosecution's key witness, the officer who had physically arrested him. The same one who had used force, and whose report claimed Malcolm had actively resisted and posed a threat to officer safety. Officer Davis took the stand looking confident. Fresh haircut, polished badge, hands clasped behind his back. His tone was even, professional, but at moments, tired. Maybe he wasn't used to being questioned by the person in handcuffs. "Officer Davis," Malcolm began, "in your report, you stated that I resisted arrest. Can you clarify how? You failed to comply with a direct order to get on the ground and stepped back. 1 step back equals active resistance. In a high-risk situation, we have to respond quickly. Did I have any object on me that you believed to be a weapon?" "No, but your hands were in your pockets." Malcolm paused. Then nodded slowly. "Did I pull anything out? Make any sudden or threatening movement?" "No. But we couldn't take that risk." "Was this interaction captured on your body camera?" "Partially," Davis shrugged. "The camera didn't start recording right away." Malcolm looked toward the judge. "Your Honor, may I draw the jury's attention to the body cam footage?" Judge Williams gave a brief nod. Permission granted. As the video played, the courtroom grew still. Malcolm was shown standing calmly, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. The command, "Get on the ground." And within seconds, he was slammed face down onto the pavement. No aggression. No shouting. Just heavy breathing. Malcolm turned toward the jury. "That's what they call posing a threat." Prosecutor Rosen quickly objected, reminding the court the footage was incomplete and didn't show the lead-up. But something had shifted. A few jurors were no longer looking at Malcolm like a suspect. They were seeing a man. Back in his holding cell, Malcolm felt it, a small breakthrough. But it was also a warning, the prosecution wouldn't sit quietly. They would push back, harder, maybe even dirty. He needed to be ready. And that preparation would come sooner than expected. That evening, a guard slid a new file through the slot in Malcolm's door. Inside was a supplement to the case, a newly added witness report. Someone claimed to have seen Malcolm near the crime scene 5 minutes before the robbery. He scanned the paper. The name hit him like a cold slap. Too familiar. The name on the report burned into Malcolm's vision like a warning flare. Carlton Mace. A man he hadn't spoken to in years. They'd gone to high school together, sat at the same desk, played on the same basketball team. Then Carlton fell in with the wrong crowd, disappeared, and was never heard from again. Now he was the eyewitness claiming he'd seen Malcolm near the scene just 5 minutes before the robbery. Malcolm flipped the page. The statement was brief: "I saw Malcolm Pierce walking quickly along 7th Street. He looked nervous. I recognized him clearly, we go way back. Walking quickly. Looked nervous." That's all it took. Malcolm did remember walking during that time, from the gas station to the bus stop. He even paused to toss some trash in a bin. But how did that add up to guilt? The next day in court, Carlton Mace sat in the witness chair, wearing a worn-out sweater and faded jeans. He looked tired. Uneasy. His eyes refused to meet Malcolm's. The prosecutor led with the usual questions. Yes, he knew Malcolm from school. Yes, he recognized him. Yes, he was nearby that night. But when it was Malcolm's turn to cross-examine, he walked up slowly and locked eyes with Carlton. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" he said calmly. "Yeah. A long time," Carlton replied, still looking down. "You're sure it was me?" Carlton hesitated. I was pretty sure." "Pretty sure?" Malcolm repeated. "Well, I saw from a distance. But the way you stood, the way you walked. When was the last time you saw my walk?" 2005. A few people chuckled quietly. The judge warned the gallery, but Malcolm didn't smile. He was locked in. "Why now, Carlton?" Malcolm pressed. "After all these years, why go to the police?" Carlton shrank in his seat. I just thought it was the right thing to do." "Did someone ask you to?" "No," Carlton said quickly. A little too quickly. Malcolm glanced at the jury. Something about this testimony didn't add up. But he had no proof, yet. After the hearing, Malcolm was handed a copy of a request the prosecutor had filed a day before Carlton was added to the witness list. It was a document regarding early release for a suspect in a separate case. And right at the bottom, something caught Malcolm's attention. The cell was restless that evening. One of the detainees was shouting at a guard. Someone was banging against the wall in a steady rhythm, like counting time. But Malcolm heard none of it. He sat with an open folder on his lap, eyes fixed on the document he'd received after the hearing, a request for early release in a case that, at first glance, had nothing to do with his own. And yet, the name of the officer who signed the request matched the surname of the officer who'd added Carlton to the witness list. It wasn't proof. But it was a direction. The next morning, Malcolm submitted a motion to access communications and documents related to early release cases involving the prosecution over the past 2 weeks. Judge Williams looked surprised. It wasn't every day a defendant took that kind of initiative. But he allowed it. In limited scope. "Are you looking for something specific, Mr. Pierce?" the judge asked before closing the session. Malcolm met his eyes. "I'm looking for the truth. And truth usually hides in the details." While waiting for a response to his motion, the prosecution introduced a new piece of evidence, surveillance footage from a nearby street camera, recorded just minutes before the robbery. The video showed a hooded figure walking past the store. "That could be anyone," Malcolm said as the footage played before the court. "The face is obscured. Lighting is poor. You call this evidence?" Prosecutor Rosen responded coolly. "We don't call it anything. We present it. The jury will decide." And though the video was undeniably blurry, Malcolm felt the shift in the room. Doubt had crept back in. He needed more. Something undeniable. Something that left no space for hesitation. Back in his cell, he replayed the footage. Paused it. Studied the frame. Again and again. The figure on the screen appeared taller than him. It wasn't obvious at first, but when compared to the signboard in the background, the proportions didn't lie. He began drafting a new motion, to request a forensic video analyst. It was a gamble. But without it, he was losing ground. That same evening, he received a partial response to his first request. Some of the information was redacted, some classified. But buried among the pages, he found it, Carlton Mace's name in an internal memo, consideration of sentence reduction in exchange for cooperation. The courtroom was nearly full. Just days ago, spectators had sat half asleep on the benches. Now they showed up early. Malcolm Pierce's trial had started to stir something, not because it was a high-profile case, but because someone dared to stand alone against the system. And, more importantly, he was doing it well. That day, Malcolm approached the podium with fresh documents in hand. The judge had allowed him to recall Carlton Mace to the stand. "Mr. Mace, I only have a few questions," Malcolm began. "But please remember, you've sworn to tell the truth." Carlton nodded. He looked even more worn out than during his first appearance. "You testified that you saw me on 7th Street that night. And you came forward voluntarily, correct?" "Yes." Malcolm opened the folder in front of him. "Were you aware that, just one day before you were added to the witness list, a request was filed in court regarding your own pending criminal case?" Carlton froze. I don't know what you're talking about." "Officer R. Mace signed a document referencing your name. It discussed the potential to review charges in your case, in exchange for constructive cooperation with the prosecution." The judge glanced toward the prosecutor. Rosen leaned forward slightly but didn't object. "Were you promised anything in return for testifying against me?" Carlton stayed silent. His gaze dropped to the floor. "Yes or no?" "They said, they might be able to help. If I remembered something useful." "But you weren't there, Carlton. And you know that." A pause. Then, quietly. "I didn't see the face. I just thought it might have been you." Silence spread through the room. Two jurors exchanged a look. Malcolm nodded. No further questions. It was a blow. A clean one. Carlton hadn't completely cracked, but he confirmed the core truth: his testimony wasn't reliable. After the break, the court heard from a neutral forensic video analyst. The expert had reviewed the prosecution's surveillance footage. "The height of the individual shown in the video is approximately 6 feet 5 inches, the expert said. "According to medical records, the defendant is 5 feet 11. So the difference is over 4 inches?" "Correct." "That's significant." The prosecution tried to downplay the findings, but the damage was done. Another, key piece of evidence had lost its weight. As the session ended, Judge Williams remained at the bench, quietly reviewing his notes. When everyone had left, he stayed seated, thoughtful. His expression wasn't skeptical anymore, it was focused. The courtroom was more crowded than ever the next morning. Someone held up a folded newspaper with the headline, "Man versus the System, the Malcolm Pierce Trial Gains Momentum." But Malcolm didn't care about the noise. He was focused. This was the most dangerous phase, the moment when the system decided to play dirty. Prosecutor Rosen stepped up to the bench right away. "The prosecution would like to introduce new evidence, received late last night," she announced. "It's an audio recording of an anonymous phone call made to the police tip line. The caller relates directly to this case." Judge Williams raised an eyebrow. "Anonymous? No verified identity?" "We're not presenting it as conclusive evidence, only as part of the overall narrative," Rosen replied calmly. They played the recording. A raspy, anxious male voice said, I know who was near that store that night. It was Malcolm Pierce. I saw him hiding something, looked like a gun, in a trash bin 2 blocks down. I don't want any trouble, that's why I'm calling anonymously. Malcolm didn't flinch. His face gave nothing away, but inside, he was boiling. He understood exactly what this was, planting doubt. Make the jury hesitate. And that might be enough. I have a question, he said, addressing the judge. Are there metadata records? Timestamp? Location? Caller ID? Rosen shrugged. Payphone. Very limited metadata. So anyone could say anything, and it ends up in this courtroom? The judge paused. I'll allow the jury to hear it, but I'll caution them, the evidentiary weight is low. The defense is free to challenge its credibility. After the recess, Malcolm returned to the stand. Let me ask you something, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said. What carries more weight? The face you see here, standing before you, fighting for his life? Or a voice in the dark, no name, no face, no consequences? The room fell silent again. After the session ended, Malcolm was handed a small envelope. No name. No return address. Inside was a slip of paper with only one sentence. I know who really did it. But they made me stay silent. That was it. The final day of the trial was overcast. A light rain fell over the city, but a crowd had already gathered outside the courthouse. Some held signs that read, "Hear him out," and, "Justice is not a privilege." For many, this case had grown beyond one man. It had become a symbol of how fragile the line was between truth and the convenience of the system. Inside the courtroom, tension hung thick in the air. The jury had returned after a relatively short deliberation. Malcolm stood tall. He wasn't praying. He wasn't trying to predict the outcome. He had done everything he could. The judge addressed the foreperson. Have you reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor. What is your decision regarding the defendant, Malcolm Pierce? Not guilty. The room erupted. Some cried. Some applauded. Some just sat in stunned silence, shaking their heads. Malcolm didn't move. He stood exactly as before, only his eyes now shimmered. And it wasn't from the rain. Judge Williams banged the gavel, officially closing the case. But he didn't rise immediately. He looked at Malcolm and said, "Stay behind after the session. I'd like a word." In the judge's chambers, silence lingered. Williams removed his robe, placed it on a chair, and walked to the window. Only then did he speak. "I'll be honest, I didn't believe in you at first. I've seen many people try to defend themselves. Almost all of them fall apart. But you made me listen. The arguments, the attention to detail, the reasoning. And above all, the dignity. Even seasoned attorneys don't always manage that." Malcolm didn't speak. He wasn't sure how to respond. The judge turned to him. "Have you ever thought about becoming a lawyer?" "I did once," Malcolm replied quietly. "But the doors kept closing. Because of where I come from. Because of money. Because of everything. So you gave up?" "I did. Until this trial." Williams sat at his desk and picked up a pen. "There's one thing I've learned over the years, there's nothing more tragic than wasted potential. A diamond lost among stones. I can't make the choice for you. But if you decide to pursue that dream again, I'll help you. Recommendations. Contacts. Even a scholarship program I oversee." Malcolm smiled for the first time in what felt like ages. "Are you serious?" "More than ever." Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky had started to clear. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, drop a comment and hit that subscribe button. We're building something real, and we can't do it without your help. More untold stories are coming.